everybody and their neighbor. So glad you could stop by for another episode of Gear and Gigs. I'm your host, Jed Stone, and today with me I've got my regular cohort in crime, Trey Hawkins. Trey, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good.
Awesome. I've got my slow camera today, so you'll have to apologize for that. We have today one of the most exciting guests that we've had on the show, virtually with us, of course. His name is Olivier Chastan, and whether you know him or not, he definitely has affected your life one way or another, and especially if you're a musician. We're going to let his story kind of unfold as we talk because it's too long to summarize in a couple of sentences. In fact, I've got a list of questions that I don't see how it's possible we're going to get through in the time we have. But needless to say, thank you so much for coming on to the show. We really appreciate your time. We know how busy you are.
Thank you so much. Excited to be there.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the things that you have done and the things you're doing. One of the things I know that will be of great interest to our viewers is Sound City. It's probably one of the, I don't want to say it's one of the smaller things you've done. You've done so many big things, but it's something that's of great import to the history of music, and recorded music, and it has such a romance associated with it. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with that and where that stands?
Yeah, so Sound City obviously started in '69, so I was not even born at that time. But basically, I would say 5 years ago or so, I decided to move from New York to LA. I owned a gorgeous studio. I was a partner actually in a studio in New York called Waterfront Studios, which is this gigantic church in Hudson, New York, which was started by a really great producer called Henry Hirsch. And so I was a partner in that, and for professional reasons I decided to move to LA, mainly because the music business moved to LA. And I always had a studio, whether it was for my own productions, whether it's for some of my clients as a publisher or record label. So I always had a place where I could send people, let them experiment, etc. And so I was looking for a place in LA and really struggling to find I looked at building a studio, I looked at buying, even the record plant was for sale at one point, and it was too big. And Bruno Mars ended up buying it actually, and or Justin Bieber, one or the other, I can't remember. And so I ended up, putting the word out, and I think it came via Craig, who's the guitar player for Lenny Kravitz, who said that he had been at Sound City and I should maybe talk to them. And so I spoke to, at the time it was Kevin Ogunas, who was, producer himself, who was exiting. And so I basically took over what he was doing and became partner, with the original owner of Sound City. And we did pretty massive, sort of upgrading of the studio and, clean it up, etc. And did that for a few years. And then probably, I think it was a year ago or so, I decided to exit the studio business entirely. I mean, it was just, I love it, but at the same time, I'm sure you guys know the headache that comes with it, especially a commercial place, right. Was just too much. And so sadly, in a sense, I mean, I still miss being in there, but I just don't miss the insane amount of headaches and responsibilities that come with it. Right. But that's a long story. Short basically was really looking for a place in LA, and it was just an endless quest, and it's just pure luck. And it was amazing. I mean, we did a massive party. We were booked solid consistently. It was just really my decision. I just didn't want to be in the studio business anymore.
Right. Yeah. Well, times have changed so much for studios. It's just. I obviously I have a great interest in that world, and I love that stuff. And I've always wondered about opening up something that was on a scale like that, but the overhead is the thing that scared me,
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that despite all those claims that, it's, very difficult, etc. I mean, that place specifically was booked solid. I mean, we really had no problem. Credit, obviously, the history. I mean, that's always helps. Just like when you look at people selling gear on Reverb, owned by X, Y, and Z. I mean, that stuff helps. Sure. Having said that, the real thing for me that was I shouldn't say the sole motivator, but one of the big motivator was to exit, I should say, was the fact that, I own all these amazing gear. I mean, stuff that, you would dream of getting when you were a kid, and things that made some of the greatest records in history. Obviously, doesn't mean you're going to make a great record, but, it helps that it's got pedigree. And it sounds good, etc. And really, a lot of the sessions were people just using Pro Tools and the USB, into a phone. I mean, that was it. So for me, I said, why am I bothering? It's great for me. I use all these things, but at the same time, what does it mean? I mean, if it's not going to be used by others, I mean, it's basically me using it for a month out a year, not worth it. And so part of it was driven by that and other reasons, but the main ones were really just exhausted from the maintenance and headache, not even financially, just the amount of to do. And then the other thing was really, people don't appreciate it. Why am I bothering in being the custodian of all these really, really expensive gear? So, and that has to be maintained, and that got to be fixed, and et cetera, et cetera. So
I bet you do. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm curious, having heard you talk about kind of your passion for that and the lack of passion from the artist standpoint or appreciation of all the really cool, outboard gear and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the industry as a whole has reached a point where people just with how compressed everything gets with MP3, they just don't care about the nuance in the final product, and so they don't care about it going into it? Or is it more of a functionality thing of we don't really have time to fly out to LA for a month to record something or do that? What do you think kind of motivated?
No, I think the main distinction for me was really and I'm not a purist, but I did record to tape. I had 4 tape machines. Mm-hmm. So, and obviously, I'm old enough where I grew up in those days. I mean, I grew up at the time where you had to learn how to, pull the tape and install it and cut and edit, etc. Right. So, doing, reduction mix downs and, and bouncing, etc. So, all that is gone. Now, I'm never intended for people to, necessarily use, tape. That's not the problem. It's just all the other gear that was there, from the echo chamber to the console to all the amazing preamps, etc. People just bypassed all this and just say, you know what, I'm good with just using the Avid preamp or this or that. I mean, there was really no, and so I don't know what prompted it. I think it's a mix of one, education, meaning you didn't grow up in those times. You can't blame people for not knowing how to use it. So it is a time investment, to your point. 2, I think there's a lack of knowledge about it, meaning why should I care? If I can hear a guitar, I can hear a guitar. So that addresses your point about the nuances. Right. And then the third part is, because of technology, people don't need, or at least a lot of artists don't really need an engineer. Some do, but really the producers now become engineers. I mean, that's what it is. In the old days, it used to be very distinct jobs, except maybe for somebody like Ken Scott or Glyn Jones, but there were not a lot who doubled as engineers. And even them had assistant engineers who were placing the mic, who were plugging in the patch bay, who were dealing with, the tape and whatever. So all that, is gone. So I don't have any judgment about it. I mean, I'm really not one of these that's just like, it's so much better. It just changed. And if you're, if you look at the ones who can really pay for those sessions, right? I mean, which would be a pop artist, what are they going to do? I mean, they're going to be, they need to do one vocal over a track that was entirely built with either plug-in synths or synths. Right. Is it really going to make a big difference? Maybe, probably not. Do I think I could make a difference to it? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, running a ARP, synthesizer, whatever it is, or mug or whatever, into a high quality preamp will give you way more weight than doing it through Pro Tools. But the reality is that it's probably just delaying the inevitable, which is that digital technology eventually will be superior to analog in terms of headroom and and fidelity, etc. I I've been out for a year, but when I left, it was not the case yet. I could still hear the difference. Do they matter? Probably. I mean, if you're doing something that's really precious, like a jazz session or classical session or something that needs to be high fidelity, great. But to your point, if you're doing something that's going to be, compressed on radio, on Spotify at 320, megabytes per second or whatever it is, I mean, nobody really gives a crap, So that was that. So for me, I just felt, what? Why am I keeping that? I mean, probably better off doing something else. And and then it's insane. You go in a session and tell someone and say, you should really try this. This is going to make a huge difference to your vocals. And no, I mean, they still want to get the U47, on the chain, but then everything after that is just, garbage. And so it made, at the end of the day, you might as well just put a SM7 or whatever. It wouldn't make any difference. So for me, there was this sort of looking at the entire chain, from, beginning where the sound source is all the way to final product, and trying to keep as little in the signal path, if you wish, as possible. I mean, that was always sort of the goal, right? And then, you get into the session and you just realize that, man, nobody cares. So, and again, no, I'm not resentful. I just said, time to do something else.
Right.
I mean, I was lucky to start as a session player, and so I worked in all these incredible studios. I mean, the Heat Factory in New York and Atlantic Recording Studios and, Sony Studios and on 54th, and, I can go on, and it was amazing. And so, my view is that that's what I knew, that's what I enjoyed, and that was my standard. I'm sure if I grew up today, I would be really happy just doing, using Pro Tools, etc. But I think it's a matter of time. I mean, if you listen, I'm a subscriber to Qobuz, so it's a streaming service, high fidelity, and so it's really, really high, bit rates. Like I think it's 192, and I don't remember, but whatever. Really high HD. It's better than CD. Way better.
Oh, wow.
Way better. It buries any of the CD. It's higher resolution. So we can get that on the output. Mm-hmm. We just needed to get it on the input. And it's sort of an interesting thing that there's a really brilliant guy called Dave Amos, who's an audio designer. Love Dave. Really lovely guy. He worked on restoring the Helios console that I had. And Dave, I was talking to him. I said, why do all these converters sound like shit? And so he explained, he broke out the whole thing for me. A lot of them, when you pump a pink noise and look at the curve, you can see the peaks, in the mid range and this, and it dips and it doesn't hold the bass, etc. So you can shoot out all of those, converters. And Dave really, had a great explanation. He said, well, the reason why those don't get improved is there's no market for it. People are happy with what they have. Right. Again, to your point. And so, but that's what needs to happen. It starts with the converters. The converters are really not good. Not good. But the minute I think the fact that we're now entering a streaming age of HD audio is going to force those to have the converters that are going to provide the quality that we're going to hear on the output.
Well, and hopefully that'll kind of elevate everything.
The case, but I think it's a matter of time.
You have to have the consumer want it. They've got to demand it. They've got to see the benefit of it.
Yeah.
And with the music that's currently being, as you said, generated so much from machines anyway, it's hard to find the soul to try to magnify with the gear, that has that quality of bringing out those delicate little subtleties and things. I mean. Yeah,
but again, I think a lot of it is splitting hair in my view. I mean, I do some work with David Crosby, from Crosby, Stills and Nash. He's an amazing artist, obviously. He's very, very sensitive, like subtleties. His music is really about subtleties. I look at it as very much like jazz. And or look at artists like Sarah Jarosz or people like that who are really put out amazing music today. It's still there. I think you can still get that. It's really for people like you and I who have very refined ears in terms of listening to music at a level. So it's sort of a niche concern.
Right.
I think what I'm saying is that, as we're entering a high def era of streaming, that's going to push audio manufacturers to want to capture that and also tell people, I say, well, how come this doesn't sound as good as this? Because suddenly, a really good example, maybe 5 years ago, I was a subscriber to Tidal. Tidal, as you know, had a high def, subscription plan. Mm-hmm. And I played Who's Next for my staff. And I said, okay, tell me if you can hear a difference. We did Spotify against Tidal. And interestingly, everybody picked up the difference. Everybody. Yeah. I mean, they did. And really where it was apparent was bass and the decay on the reverb. It's, Olympic Studio where the album was recorded at plate reverbs. And the reverb was getting cut off, because, as you know, the MP3s or any compressed format shaves at the bottom and top, pretty much. I mean, I'm simplifying, but that's what's going on.
Right.
So people hear it. It's there. It's not like they're not, listening and paying attention. It's just, not as apparent right now because there's no comparison. So I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, Amazon's got an HD service now, Amazon Music. So, it's starting to spread a little bit. It's just a matter of time before it gets more mainstream, and hopefully we're going to see a beneficial effect out of it.
Well, and that streaming service, we'll get the link and we'll put that in the show notes because that's super exciting to me. I had no idea.
Qobuz, it's Qobuz.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
That'll be exciting to listen to because even some of the vinyl pressings that I have are basically just the same compressed MP3 audio, just pushed to vinyl.
You've got mobile Fidelity, or I forgot the name. Some who do high level reshoots. I actually don't listen to vinyl personally. I know it's sacrilege, I'm sure on your channel, but for me it's sort of a downgrade. I'm telling you, the high def resolution is mind-boggling. It's fucking incredible.
That's exciting.
And I ended up actually making an investment in upgrading my entire audio chain to listen. So I now have a Chord Quest, which is amazing. I mean, it was really night and day overnight when I plugged it in. Mm-hmm. So it's a DAC converter, obviously. And, and I'm just going into IMF TLS, really old 70s speakers who are, fabulous. And that's it. So it goes from, I've got a Blue Sound audio streaming server into the Quest, the Chord, and out to the speakers. There's nothing else. And, awesome. And it goes through optical cable, and that's it. I'm done. I'm set. I really don't need anything else. So.
Nice.
See, now this makes me think, ironically, given our conversation, of a friend of mine who's very much into old school. It's got to be vinyl. It's got to be the high-end tube power amps and tube preamps and everything separate. And he's got the record player that sucks the record down on with vacuum, so it goes totally flat. So there isn't a single little. I mean, he wants it to be the purest vinyl, spectacular tone there is. And here's the gentleman complaining about the guys who don't want to appreciate that stuff in the studio going, I'm just going to take this box and go straight to my speakers. No tubes, no messing around. Yeah. I just want it easy.
Yeah.
I want it to sound excellent, but I want it easy.
Yeah, I mean, I have quad speakers. So I use quad two amplifiers, like tube. Which are not plugged in right now, and I also own. I probably have 8 pairs of speakers. I mean, like anybody that works in the studio, you're sort of endlessly chasing. And so I have, for example, what are they called? Tele Lockwood, which actually I'm selling right now. And I have the last pair of Kadak speakers that were installed. They were the ones that Trident Studio. I don't know. I got tons of crap, but yeah.
Wow. Well, that's an interesting problem to have. Too much amazing gear.
Yeah.
Especially when a lot of it's got history to it too.
Yeah. So I think it's a lot of it is really just chasing, which is what a lot of people do. You're just constantly chasing to try to get the sound that you heard and want to replicate.
Right.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit? We've talked a little bit about your studio work, and it's just I could go on and on asking you a zillion questions about the gear or about who you've worked with, but we do have a limited amount of time, so I want to move on a little bit. It's in looking you up online for this interview, and you're a hard person to find a lot of information about, but one of the things that came up is legacy preservation, and it seemed like it was it emotionally has a big feel for me. It's like, that seems like something very important. And it seems like you have a passion for that beyond just the business standpoint. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what you're doing with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys are going to relate. I mean, obviously it starts with listening to music, right? You're listening to all these great records, anything from, the Beatles, as obvious as the Beatles, and as obscure, I don't know, King Crimson or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you're hearing all these great albums, and you want to understand everything about those. How were they made? Which instrument? Who's playing? Where was it recorded? Etc. So the credits, in the album become really your best friend, right? I mean, you're really trying to get a sense of, who was involved, and how did that work? And so as you go through that, you're, starting to put the pieces together. Obviously, I grew up pre-internet era, so that was a nightmare to get information. But one of the things that I got lucky early in my career is, working as a musician, and then, actually being able to hire, some of these guys. I worked with Ken Scott, people like that who, I did a session with Glyn Jones. Didn't go very well, but, still. And so, so you get to pick up, a little bit. But really, when you go back early, that's what you're trying to figure out. What is George Martin doing? What is a bureau like? Can I see photos? And blah blah blah. And so, as it's evolving, we're getting into you're getting into a situation where you're saying, okay, well, I have researched it. Now I want to try to replicate, right? And that's when you start getting into the studio business and figuring out which gear does what, etc. So over the years, for me, there was, obviously that drive, which is to try to replicate those sounds. And so the byproduct of that is what you were talking about, which is sort of the preservation of the gear. I own, for example, the last Sound Techniques console in existence. Sound Techniques is niche for most people, but it's critical to history of recorded music. I have the original Island 1969 Helios mixing desk, etc. So I own that still. It's in storage, fortunately, but whatever. So you get all this, and you start trying to say, okay, how did they do it, etc. It's sort of a fool's search in a lot of ways. I mean, you're pretty much going against trying to do something that is impossible. I mean, the stock of the tape is not the same, the cables are not the same, the room's not the same, the musicians, obviously, that's the obvious, we're not even in the same realm, etc. So, but at least, there's this sort of search. Now, what it migrated into for me today is that, I run a company that acquires and manages the legacy of iconic artists. So talk about the Beach Boys and etc. We manage the Eagles, we manage Fleetwood Mac and Steely Dan and Van Halen, and I can go on and on. So it is the exact same thought process in a sense, or the same rationale, which is they've contributed to culture in a very important fashion. We have a responsibility to maintain this, right, and to make sure that new generations know about it and that it gets translated for them in some ways. So that sort of is one big thread, if you wish, throughout my career, is that I have a certain obsession towards not just music but just culture from specific era, let's say 1950s, 1970s, 80s, etc. Right? I mean that sort of that period, and you want to make sure that your passion gets shared with other people, and right. So part of that means that you're a protector, but you're a curator and you're a marketer, and you do all that, right? So that's really sort of the long answer to that question.
Okay, so you've You've painted a picture that it's going to be confusing to some of our listeners, I think, who are more brass tacks, equipment guys, musician guys, and you've thrown out some band names that are going to have everybody, thinking, "Oh my gosh, it's all over the place." So maybe you can tell us, for instance, Trey is a big Fleetwood Mac fan. Tell us about what you do for Fleetwood Mac, so we can get an idea of how that works.
So yeah, no. So okay. So first of all, I never did recording except from 2 years. I never did recording full time.
Okay.
One, I could have had opportunities to do it, but there was a clear decision on my end that I don't want to be in the business that all my friends are, which is to record sometimes amazing bands, 90% of the time really shit bands.
Right.
I just don't have the...
Hey, dude, this is my life, man!
I just don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the patience. I don't have the personality to deal with it. So,
right.
So for me, there was a clear decision that I would own recording studios that would pay for themselves, hopefully, so that I would have a place to go to make my own records and my friends' records. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously was a big driver. So I always had a career in parallel in the music business. I was a label executive. I was a publisher, still a publisher, and now today I have a business that I'm a partner with Irving Azoff, who's a very famous manager, and Irving has been the Eagles manager from the inception, manages Fleetwood Mac, etc. So through him, I get to work with all these great bands, and and so we manage them like we manage any. Like anybody manages a band, which is, we help them tour, we help them put out an album, we help them, do all those things as for their career. And so, I mean, I'm not going to get into the job of a manager, but
sure.
It's pretty self-explanatory. But the thing that Irving has built, over the years is, he's got the same clients. He's been Steely Dan's manager since the beginning. He's been, etc. So. A lot of what we do is really figuring out every day, how do you keep these great legacies into the public consciousness, whether it's through marketing, whether it's through a new product, whether it's through touring, blah, 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 right? All those things that you would imagine that a manager does. And so that's a big portion of my day, my life. So a lot of what we're doing, what I was doing, before that was really being a publisher and label. And so that entails, if you want to be competitive, you've got to sign current music. And so that meant, working with, the Buneta brothers who produced and wrote songs for, One Direction and Shawn Mendes, etc. And so that was interesting because, in a sense, that's not where my heart is, but as you do, I mean, I did this for a long time, so I guess, I had to like it. But what was interesting is to see how the process is so different than what, you're probably replicating in your studio. This is really, I know people think it's a factory, but it's sort of a factory that's guided by, a deep commercial sense of what music should be like, to the general public. That's a skill set. That's a real skill set. I mean, to be able to sit down with an artist that you sometimes have never met, right, and write material that's going to resonate with them, even if they didn't write any of it, and also keep in mind that it's got to be broad enough to reach a very wide audience, whether it's Katy Perry or whatever kind of music. I mean, it's a skill set. It's not for me, but it's a skill set, and so. We're not, so for me, I went from that to suddenly plunging back into, the sort of legacy business that I really like. And so, so that's really, sort of the link there at the end of the day is really about, passion for the creative process and figuring out how to be an enabler to that. So you can apply that in the studio, you can apply it outside of the studio. Putting out a record, helping a writer, get their songs heard and out. It's all one big chain, and it's just a matter of how close you want to be to the creative process. Do you want to be next to the musician in the studio while they write. You want to be even before that with the writer that's sending the song. Do you want to be the label that puts it out when it's finished? You pick your place. Just pick where you wanna be. So, and then the other thing, to be honest, is I saw the complete breakdown of and really the failure of all the studios. They, not by intent, but people moved. Home studios took over. I just didn't want to be part of it. I mean, I have no interest in trying to salvage. I saw Troy Germano was trying to salvage, the Hit Factory, which ended up being condos in New York, and Criterion that ended up selling, etc. So Criterion, in Miami, etc. So, it's tough business to be in. Very tough.
Well, I feel like, I'm a little bit younger, but it's changed so much just even within my lifetime. Like, I can't imagine, I was kind of on the cusp of some of the things, I didn't grow up with internet, but from adolescence, when I started really listening to and kind of falling in love with music, it was at least kind of there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of take for granted, I guess, that because we have the internet, because we have this connectivity, that all the greats that kind of brought music to the elevation point that it is now, we just assume they're always going to be there and it's always going to be kind of in our face, but you're the guy behind that's holding everything up and going, no, it's still here. It's not just happening naturally. You're actively doing it, so that stuff doesn't get lost, and that's really cool.
It's noble. It's a noble pursuit. Besides, the music connections, just as a legacy for humanity, and trying to keep those iconic, important artists alive in the culture's memory is, I think, a critical thing.
Well, and especially my sister has never grown up in a world where she didn't have an iPad.
Yeah.
She's never going to have context for non-digital anything, much less music and stuff like that. And so giving people the education, the context for why this stuff is not just important, but just cool. Because that's, at the end of the day, everybody got into music because it was cool. It made you feel something and you liked it.
I think, the music itself is never the problem.
Right.
Once you expose people to it, it's really exposing them. That's a real challenge. It's like wine. Some people may dislike wine, but it's very much a minority. It's an easy product to sell. You just have to make sure that people are aware it's available,
right,
where you can get it, and why you should give it a shot. So my job is give it a shot.
Right.
That's really what it's all about. And give context, and explain why historically it's been important. If you look at, it could be as simple as doing a documentary like Laurel Canyon, or doing a biopic like the Queen one, etc. But it's really a day-to-day thing. You just have to create content, whether it's for Instagram, Facebook, etc., and just get that out.
Right.
So and I think the studios are not really good. V-Road actually does a good job of marketing. We've got a full team. They're doing plugins, they're doing merch, they're doing all sorts of things, and really capitalizing on the history. A lot of people don't. If you look at, I don't want to name names, but a lot of the studios, you just don't hear about them. Right. So and I think that history is part of their DNA and should be really exploited. They
right.
don't.
So
yeah, we don't pivot very well. It doesn't seem like within the industry to adjust to new things, and especially with as fast as they've been changing recently.
Well, music listeners are modern. Music makers are traditional and classic-minded generally. Guitar players they want tube amps from the 1950s. The peak guitar year was 1959, for God's sakes. It's. It's like being a guy who plays violin. You want something that's really old. It's not. You don't want cutting edge. So it's tough to. I think the juxtaposition of the musicians making the art wanting a certain ethos behind it, and then the listeners having a much more disposable attitude. We talk a lot on the show about how a guitar player listens to somebody playing guitar and they think, "Oh, is that a Les Paul? Is that a Strat? I wonder if he's playing through a Marshall." And your girlfriend or your mom or your dad or whoever listens to it goes, "Guitar." And they could care less what kind or whatever, unless it sounds particularly harsh or terrible or whatever. They don't care. They classify it as guitar and move on. And we've tried to say once in a while, just to remind musicians why we get so fired up about the the idiosyncrasies and particularities of gear is that it's to inspire the musician, right? So you want to go into that studio and you want to have that environment and those pieces of gear fired up so that when you go to play, maybe the sound won't be discernibly different from a pod. Maybe it won't be. Maybe a guy with a pod can make it sound good, but your performance playing through that, feeling the romance of that gear and all that stuff, getting your fizz going, that's what comes through in the performance. So our theory is the performance is the thing that benefits most from the pernickettiness of gear that musicians tend to have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we justify spending it to our wives. That's our story. We're sticking with it. Please don't fight us on that. We need your help here. So
it's for me, looking at all the equipment, it was interesting because I started like everyone, buying what you read about, the API and the Neve, etc. And when you really use your ears, is when you start really segregating. I mean, by the end, by the time when I exited Sound City, I had very, very little gear in a lot of ways. There's not a hoarder by any stretch. I mean, I don't know. It's still, like a sync IO and, syncs that you can't escape. But in terms of outboard and others, not a lot. It's really not a lot. And part of it was really this process of educating yourself over the years and just saying, okay, do I really like this Neve thing? I know people want it when they come in the studio, but is it really something that is sonically additive to what I'm doing? Does it bring anything? No, I didn't like it. It distorts a lot. It doesn't hold the bottom really well. It's not for me. API, really harsh. I mean, chop your heads off. I had Uray monitors, 813. Yeah, they make you work. Do I want to listen to this every day when I wake up? No. I mean, it's just like brutal.
Yeah.
So you got all these things like distressors. People love distressors. Okay. I mean, yeah, it's sort of your 4x4 compressor, but it's not a very good compressor. I mean, put a bass through it. Tell me if you can hear the bass. You go in the room, you walk back in the studio, it's gone. It just doesn't hold it.
Right.
So you get things like that. I mean, I even own a 670 for many years, which I restored and, etc. Cool, I used it on vocals here and there. Slow, not a really fast compressor for a start. And so there's all this process that you go through where you just realize that, yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, that's what the Beatles use. They use 660, and others in the studio. That's what they had at the time. Does that mean that that's what I got to use now? Not really,
right.
No. So I think that's sort of I don't want to say painful, but certainly the process that I went through. And, in the end, it was really KM56, U48, a few obscure mics. I mean, I have some here I can show you, things like that. And then that was it. I mean, so yeah, it's expensive as hell. U48 is not cheap. KM56 are not cheap. But, I had 3 KM56, 1 U48, a few other mics, and that was good enough. I can record. And I had barely any external preamps. I used Helios, or I used actually MM1000, the tape machine. I ended up using those preamps on nearly every recording that I made. I had to get them modded, but they sounded extraordinary. And that was that. And so I think, really the big lesson for me was using my ears. And stop worrying about, whether it's a review, whether it's a blog, whether it's gear slots, whatever it might be. I don't care. I ask for the shit on loan. I'll try it. If I like it, I'll keep it. If I don't, it's gone. And and then really looking at situations. Not even instruments, but frequency bands. If I really want to capture a very high frequency, and smooth it out, what am I going to use? Is it a M160? Is it a Bayer? Is it a ribbon mic? Is it the RCA? Whatever. I'll use that. I'll take that. If I want to do very detailed recording of a guitar, I don't think you can really beat a KM56. It's as good as it gets. And again, I mean, that's a great example. People buy the KM84 as a substitute. It has nothing to do with each other. They're totally different mics. And the KM84 is really, really, really harsh. Again, it's tough mic. So it was all this process, over the years of buying, selling, etc. But it took me a few years to really have the sort of, I don't want to call it courage. There's no courage in it, but the decision to really offload. So okay, I'm going to stick to what I like. And by the way, it makes your process way simpler. Because you know exactly what you're going to get. When you pick a mic, you don't have to put 6 in front of a musician and hope for the best. You learn your gear really well. The thing that I did have a lot of were instruments, and that's a totally different story. 2 pianos and and tons of synths, etc. But that's your palette. That's really what matters, right? Because that's what allows you to express yourself. The mic doesn't.
Well, he's describing my situation pretty well. I feel pretty good about it. I've got it down to just a handful of preamps I like, 3 or 4 mics, a couple tube mics that I like, and then just instruments like crazy. Just because that's where the inspiration comes, when you hand it to the musician and go, here, and they're inspired. And if they're not, pull it out, give them something else. They don't care about the rack gear. Just find the stuff that sounds big, that sounds full. That's good. That makes me feel better about it.
I love the fact, because I say this all the time about the ears and training the ears, and people are like, oh, when you're learning guitar, because that's my little microcosm of all of this is, when you're learning guitar, like, what's the hardest part? Like, well, training your ear is the most important part. The mechanics will come, you can get there, but training your ear is the harder, more important part, because if you can't hear it, you can have all the technique and all of the mechanics in the world, but if you can't tell what's good, even though it's slightly subjective, like what's universally accepted as good, then you're not going to be as inspired a player.
Right.
And so, having that, I really think that we've kind of lost that a little bit within the industry for people that are maybe aspiring professionals. The professionals, I think that's probably the difference, is somebody that has the ear and has that kind of, we think about it like an it factor, but it's really the ear and the ability to hear things and objectively make decisions based on that.
And taste. When you hire a producer or an engineer in the old days, a lot of it is you're hiring somebody's taste. Anybody can learn to wire something up, but everybody's going to choose something different out of that same set of knobs. So you're picking somebody that has the right choice making machine inside their head for you. That's the hard thing to find, I think. But
I think that's sort of the thing that gets that technology has done, is because it allowed democratized recording so much. You just don't go through the same grueling process, and so you can use GarageBand right now and you make a sound. So that's a beautiful thing. Right. At the same time, does that mean that you're going to know how to really capture that acoustic guitar properly? Probably not. But again, it's a matter of decision as to how much people care and whether it really matters. I think it matters. I think it will matter over time, over a long period of time. I've seen great recordings do survive. But then again, there's a lot of really shitty recordings who, because of the songwriting, the performance, and how compelling they are, you don't really care.
Right.
I mean, I'll be there by the 4 tops. I mean, the vocal is distorting like crazy the entire time. Do you care? Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
So they're clipping the entire recording, and again, different era. But it's and now, strangely enough, you've got plugins like Decapitator, where you're breaking distortion back in. That's how crazy it is because of the insane headroom that we have in digital. And so you're not going the opposite way.
Yeah, I played something I had recorded for Travis Larson the other day, and he said, "Oh man, those drums are too clean." And I'm like, "But all my life I've been struggling to get clean sounding drums, and I overshot the mark." He says, "I've gone too far, and now I have to dirty up my drums. I'm not sure how to do that. I feel bad."
But I think that's a good. I mean, I don't know this artist, but in a sense, what's interesting there is that the artist should have known what he wanted in the first place. That's not happening. Meaning, if that's the sound that he wanted, which is, let's say like a Led Zeppelin sound, right, where it's on the verge,
Sure.
of distortion all the time, you can hear it, especially on the toms, and so then that's what should have been, and I'm not blaming you, but that's what should have been raised at the beginning. So what are you trying to do? You want to be Steely Dan Gaucho, or you want to be Led Zeppelin?
Yeah, I was going for more the Steely Dan for that particular track, but yeah.
And so yeah.
I hadn't thought about it so much in terms of distortion. I thought about it more in terms of microphone bleed or gating or that kind of thing. So it's interesting.
I mean, same story.
But it might have been distortion. Maybe that's the part that I didn't get.
But you look at Led Zeppelin. I mean, obviously, there's a famous story of Glyn discovering the Glyn Jones now technique, named after him. Where you got 3 mics. But you listen to Who's Next. It's another Glyn Jones recording. It's a very open sound, very open. So people think, well, that's what Glyn does. But then you listen to his Clapton recordings, same place, super tight.
Yeah.
Different type of drums. So clearly, there's a decision that was made and a conversation as to what reflects the music the most. And is it the boisterous Who and Led Zepp, or is it sort of the more quiet Clapton laid back Clapton recordings? Actually, part of the album, laid back. Yeah. And so you start thinking about those things. And for me, a lot of what I used to do was really having these really long conversations before going in the studio and sending references and say, okay, that track we're going to do like, I don't know, Trevor Horn, and this, I'm thinking doing this, and that's going to be more like that, and this, and we're going to do more Bee Gees criteria, etc. So, one big thing, having this, it's not just having the tools, it's having the references as well to be able to have a very informed and intelligent and productive conversation with the artist before you get in the studio. That's really, for me, half of the battle. And obviously I'm a musician, so the arrangements, were big. And I think that's a thing that people put aside and don't worry about. The arrangement is, I'm not exaggerating, for me, it's 70% of the sound that you're going to get out. And the way, for me, I learned that was, being a session player. Again, the days where you had real recording studio, you used to have, you go in the room, and sometimes you have an artist that tells you, okay, you do this, you do that, you did the bass thing on this, and there's a coda here and a break there, and we do a breakdown, and we, all those things. Most of the time, it's more the artist just playing the song for you, and then you as a band self-arrange yourself, and that's how it used to be. So I used to be in a room and somebody would raise a hand. Sometimes it would be me, sometimes it would be someone else. I mean, it doesn't matter. It sort of happened naturally. Yeah. And you say, okay, why don't you on the drum just don't play the hi-hat every 4 there. Just skip it. And then no crash on this. And then no fills there, or maybe put a fill there. Me on the bass, I'm going to play an A flat against your, F major or whatever it might be. And we're going to do that, and then this, make it more glissando, or and just sort of put it all together, and that means that all that work that makes for a recording to be quite either clean or prepared, right, was in there. And so the artist would then come in and say, okay, well, you know what, I want more drive and energy. I want you to play eighth note on the bass, just pump it, right? So let's just etc. So all that work used to happen. Now it gets deferred, a lot of it because of the unlimited amount of tracks, and right. So I think that has shifted a little bit of the way, not a little bit, actually a lot, of how people conceive of recording and what makes a great recording, which in my view is really 80% musicianship and arrangement. And they're both obviously linked, the two sides of the same coin. And when you don't have that, it makes it really, really difficult. I know that I did struggle myself, making recording with Pro Tools, where suddenly I'm thinking, okay, you know what? I don't have to deal with this now. I don't.
Right.
I do. And so I went back eventually to the way I used to do recording and building them like I used to build them on tracks, build them on tape, which eventually I need to go back to tape. It's like crazy, but that's how it sort of happened.
whenever we do gear shootouts, we're always surprised as soon as you close your eyes and listen. You almost never agree with what you thought you were going to do, or it's very disconcerting to close your eyes and make judgments and then open them and realize that your eyes have so much to do with how you've judged something you should really only be listening to. And back when I was doing music on tape, before we got into the digital thing, you couldn't see the music. You had to just listen. And my viewpoint on everything was so different. The way I organized the song and arranged the song and worked on the transitions between parts was mentally very different than it is now, because now you can think of it as sections. This is the blue section, the orange section, yeah.
Completely. Yeah, the grid is really, for me, I know I'm going to sound like an old fart, but it's a big issue. Yeah. Because it's really forcing, everybody now is striving for, excuse me, is striving for perfection all the time.
Yeah. And
perfection is graphical. It's graphical perception. Why is this snare not aligned there? Let's move it. And you don't need to move it. You don't need to.
No. Why do we play to a click? People in general shouldn't play to a click.
That's interesting, because a lot of people tell me, the click's always been there. People have always played to click. Not always, but it's always been an option where you've got the feedback mic, and they used to just put a metronome and fit it in the headphone microphone. So it used to happen all the time. I mean, the best example was Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, that's entirely down to a click. You would have never been able to do this track. I don't care how great musicians they were. That's the biggest myth. It's like, well, look at Queen and Bohemian Rhapsody. So no. Bohemian Rhapsody is a ton of tape edit and a click track running through to keep things together. So it's always been part of it. I think where it really became, for me, the big shift is not the click track in the headphones. It's the ability to move the music to a grid.
The quantizing, that kind of stuff.
That's night and day. Yeah. And you can't help yourself. You sit and you say, to your point, and you just want to say, we'll just move it. No, not really. You don't really need to move it. It's unnecessary. I mean, sometimes, if it's really bad, but technically, and you can hear on recordings, I mean, even the ability to change volume and normalize volume. A drummer is going to suddenly pick up and say, that snare drum is weaker than the other. Either replace it or, raise the volume, right? Just, do your little automation. Yeah, okay, we used to do that, but, even with flying faders, it was a nightmare to do. So, you know what? You live with it. And then in the thing that the grid makes you lose is the sense of perspective. Does it matter? It's always a key question. Does it really matter? And people are going to fight and argue, and musicians, etc. No, it doesn't matter. It's really irrelevant to the final product, to a recording that's going to be commercially released. You know what? You want to spend more time on something? Spend some time on songwriting. That's more important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which it's interesting bringing up that the session bands were kind of doing more of the arranging than the artist, at least initially. You play it and it's more of a collaboration. Man, that's crazy, because I feel like any of the projects that I've ever been in or any of the session work that I've done, the artist comes in and it's, here's a whiteboard and here's everything that everybody's playing at this time, and it's already been pre-done, which is cool. I mean, it makes my job easier, but it also takes the fun and the creativity and the spontaneity of creation from it, and the fact that my perspective is going to be different than the guitar player that they were working with or whoever, and having those little subtleties. I mean, again, to your credit before, maybe the average person doesn't care, but I do. Like, I care anytime that I'm doing a recording.
You got to distinguish between two types, right? You got bands. I mean, let's go back to the Who, since we were using them. You listen to Pete Townshend's demos. I mean, they're unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, he had a little Helios sidecar in his home, as a tape player and or 8-track, whatever it was, and he used to bring demos that sometimes became the foundation of the tracks. That's how good they were. Right. So you got that, right, where it's pretty much, just replicated in a more hi-fi environment. Then you got the other side, the flip side, which is really, the sort of like Paul Simon type, and like Carly Simon and Carole King, etc., where they don't have a band.
Right.
And so they're going to rely on, name it, like Steve Gadd and, whoever is, the player of the moment, Chuck Rainey, etc. That's when it came into play. I mean, I was lucky to see the tail end of it and participate in it. And, I have a vivid memory of doing a session with, with Steve Gadd, of all people, being extremely intimidated. I mean, it was, there was another one actually, was the drummer from Orleans, what's his name? Jerry Marotta.
Oh, yeah.
And Jerry, I remember doing a session with Jerry, and I played him the song once, and he wrote, it's like he had crayons. He took a piece of paper and wrote all Roman numerals, 1, 3, 5, 8, 1, 3, 5, so he broke down the entire song, and one listen, just one freaking listen, had everything on paper in front of him, and was able to play and do all the fills, all the turnarounds, all the breaks, all the slams, you name it, all there in front of him. So that's what used to happen. And then for fun, actually, I remember during the session, going into the control room and telling Jerry, I said, hey, play that now, disco style. And he would, on the spot. So, you've got that, right, which used to happen. And all those guys knew each other. I mean, I was not part of his community in the sense I was way younger, I was 22, 23, but, if somebody would come in, they had played with each other, they knew sort of what they were doing and, etc. So, even calling each other. And so that's really, again, there's no nostalgia about it, but that's a big part of what used to happen. And these guys used to do 2 to 3 sessions a day. So the level of practice that you get out of this was, I know that I got way better, within 6 months, just having to, constantly, be in the studio on the spot, having to deliver. It is draining, but, it is at the same time really exciting and great.
Wow.
That's cool.
Well, I just want to keep talking because you're just so fascinating and everything you say is full of incredible information that's useful or something I always wanted to know. But I feel guilty because I know we're taking up too much of your time. Can we hit you with the top 5, which is what we like to do with all
Sure.
guests?
Yeah.
All right. We talked a little bit about this while you were doing a phone call off to the side there for a little bit, and we've decided that we want to ask you your top 5, your personal top 5 favorite albums that have come out in the last 5 years. Just the last 5 years. I know, that's the hard part. Because otherwise you just say Beatles 1 through 5 and we'd be done.
I don't even think I can give you 5, but let me see.
All right, I'll give you 10 years. You can go 10 years.
Even then.
I know. All right.
Honestly, don't leave too much in this world, but I'll tell you. I'll name a few. Sarah Jarosz, I don't remember the name of the album. I can look it up right now, but I thought it was an
We allow cheating. It's okay. We have a long history of our guests
right
cheating.
Now.
Mark Lettieri spent half an hour on his computer cheating.
What was her album that was really beautiful?
Was it Tack?
No, actually, let me see. It's that one. It's Song Up in Her Head. It was a beautiful album. David Crosby's got a band called CPR, and I thought that was really fantastic. He's the band the album that they put out was, they put a few, but there's really one that I thought was really amazing. What was it called? Just Like Gravity.
Just Like
Red
Gravity.
album.
Okay.
Who else? I think I can think of right now. I don't know. And it's a terrible question, because if you had asked me top 5 albums from 50 years ago, I could like 20 hours. But yeah, no. I mean, I'll tell you of the recent, and what I mean by recent, the past 20 years.
Okay, we'll go back 20. That's fine. We'll keep stretching.
That came out. The one that I thought was really beautiful was Coldplay Parachutes. That album really, I still listen to it today. I think it was a fantastic album. It's beautifully composed and arranged and played, and etc. But in terms of recent albums, like, you really got me there. I mean, there's stuff that I worked on, but I don't want to really get into this. But those are really I don't know. Those are the only two I could name. Unfortunately, I actually did like the Tony Bennett, Lady Gaga album as well. I thought it was really interesting, and but it's more traditional standard jazz.
Sure.
Wait, you know what? I'll tell you what song. Let me. Sorry, I don't remember the name. I'm gonna look it up right now. Keith Jarrett put out an album called Munich 2016. Just came out last year.
Okay.
And that is gorgeous. Really beautiful, beautiful album. And that will be that's another good one that I thought was absolutely stunning.
When you play, what's your...
Oh, and Johnny Mitchell, the Johnny Mitchell, the River Letters by Herbie Hancock. That was a great album.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is him doing covers of Johnny Mitchell songs.
Okay.
Okay.
I love Herbie. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
So when you play for yourself as a musician, what sort of music do you like to play?
I don't play as much. I unfortunately have an issue with my finger, so I can't play bass as I used to. I've got to be very gentle. I usually nowadays, if I pick up the bass and plug it in, I'll play along some records, and it's totally random. It could be anything from Brazilian music, like Milton Nascimento, Elis Regina, Marisa Monti, etc. I love that. Jazz rock, massive jazz rock. Mahavishnu Orchestra, Frank Zappa, things like that. What else? I love, like Johnny Mitchell. I'll play along to Port and Spark. Great backup band. That was the LA Express. Amazing backup band. So usually I just challenge myself to play along with great records and learn, totally memorize the part from the bass player. And hopefully sometime I can find, the version without, missing a few instruments and be able to play along literally and write a new part, things like that. So it's more, for fun nowadays. I don't gig anymore. And I have no reason to, but I do keep, trying to, keep practicing and playing and all that.
Well, that's good.
Very,
I'm glad to hear you're still playing. Once you're a player, you should always stay a player. I feel like that's important.
Yeah.
Even if we get
No,
wrapped up in other things.
I can go and bring it if you want. I have a 1969 Fender Jazz bass that I don't think I'll ever... Actually, no, you know what? I just lent it to a friend. I apologize.
He teases us and then he takes it away. Oh.
I have two things in the house. I have a 72 Telecaster and a 69 Jazz bass. That's all I've got.
Oh.
Well, I just want that Sparkle Strat, so
Maybe we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out. I'll have to figure out that. Well,
but yeah, no. So that's a lot of that's really all. I'll tell you what I have still today. I have the 69 Helios. I've kept a M269, which is a different version of the U67, which I prefer. A different tube. I've kept the Sound Techniques console, which I think I'm going to rack. I'm going to start selling the modules and just rack it. And what else? And I think that those are really the main thing. And then some instruments. I still have a beautiful piano. I have a Bechstein that was actually at Sound City. Probably gonna, it's for sale. We'll see if somebody. It's hard to sell a piano, as you probably know. It's nearly impossible. But so. For the moment, I still have that. But everything else, all the obscure shit that I had, I had a Dynamite piano Rhodes, which is really difficult to find. I don't know if you know Dynamite piano, but that was.
I don't.
It was a spec sort of. They used to do custom Fender Rhodes. Okay. So you had different types. You had one with sort of a phaser integrated. They had a stereo spread that you could have. They would mod it so. Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock.
Are they the ones that had the whammy that they would put on those things?
Correct.
Okay, I remember that.
The one where you could displace, you could move the entire keyboard.
I remember those, yeah.
And so I had a lot of those things over the years, that you search and find, which are really difficult to get. I had also a Les Paul, which had been modded by Jimmy Page. We had two of the mics out of phase. Really cool. You can hear it on Led Zeppelin 3, for example. Things like that where, again, you're chasing, right? It's that mission. You trying to get to those sounds. And I had David Gilmour's owned some rotating speaker, a little bit like a Leslie, but it's called a Doppler. He had them custom made. I bought a pair from his roadie, the European roadie. He had so many. He had made like 16 pairs or something like that. So I bought one. So a lot of those things, are actually, I used to own, and that's what I was really looking for. It's like, I can hear that sound. It would be useful. How do you do it? And you buy the Leslie, the 122 or 125, whatever it is, and I had the big ass pedal that you plug in, that allows you to have the instrument line in. Right. And it was okay, but it was not perfect.
Right.
And so just talking about Dark Side of the Moon, you hear all those sounds and you say, okay, what is in there? He's got the Yamaha, right? He had this big Yamaha, I forgot the model number, which had these little rotating speakers. And I said, okay, I'm going to have that. Listen to it. Didn't sound like what he had. So then I realized that he had disconnected the main speaker. He only used the rotary ones, and the rest was fed through his regular guitar amp, which was a high watt.
Right.
So I said, okay, now I've got it, right? So one mic goes to the rotary, one mic goes to the high watt. I'm there, And then you're saying, okay, well then he hits a pedal, and you can hear a different kind of rotation. So clearly it's a Leslie. So you try the Leslie and it's not there. And then, you learn as you research that he had this Doppler, which really were just 3 speakers rotating, totally variable speed, complete variable speed. And that's what was Mike. And so now you realize that on some songs, it's not just 2 speed of the Leslie. You realize that he had, the ability to control variable speed, completely variable speed. So, you do all those things, and as you go through it, you start accumulating this and that and start putting together your toolbox. And so what I've sold is my toolbox, but I've kept the things that are really special to me,
right.
Either because they're unsellable, like a piano, or, the bass. Bass I've owned since I'm 23. I actually bought it from the bass player of the Flaming Lips.
Oh, wow.
Oh, cool.
Either that or I think it's a Flaming Lips. I'm 90% sure. It's a long time ago. Yeah. And interestingly enough, talk about preserving things, and or actually in this case not preserving. I was doing a rehearsal on Rivington Street in New York. There used to be tons of rehearsal space there, and Quad Studio was nearby, etc. And put it down, and somebody backed on it and broke the neck.
Oh.
The original neck, exactly. That was my reaction. Now, one thing is that I don't have big hands. I've got short hands. It became an opportunity to get my own custom neck, change my playing for the best, forever. Suddenly, I didn't have to compete with all the people who could put the thumb on top of the E string, etc.
Right.
I was in business. I had something that actually fit me and didn't change the sound of the bass, even though I ended up changing the pickups as well later. I still have the original, but I ended up getting rid of the pickups.
Right.
And had modern pickups that the guy was doing custom made in Nashville, and it's amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So anyhow, I'm not sure. I'm just babbling here, but
well, it's that's an interesting topic, really. The whole making it your own thing. We've talked a lot about signature instruments on the show or modifying instruments on the show. So that's fascinating that it actually worked out better for you, in not just it sounded good or it felt good, but it changed your playing. That's pretty impressive.
Well, but if you look at the reality that we're all into this, I need a 1959 Les Paul, right? And then you start really digging or even talking to musicians. I mean, I can tell you on the session scene, very few people, actually not nobody, but very, very few people had instruments that were absolutely original. You just don't. I mean, look at Gilmour. I can't remember the name of his guitar, but he had this black strap. I mean, this fucking thing was like Frankenstein.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing on it. All came from harvested from different instruments. You look at, even the drum kits, right? I mean, the reason why drum doctors in LA is still thriving is that, everybody wants to get something different. It's not working. I need a different pedal. I mean, so the reality, there are no rules. And by the way, when you look at the gear in the studio, especially the recordings that we know, the ones that come from the Gold Star and the Sunset Sound, etc. Everything was modded. Everything was modded for impedance, was modded for electrical current, for voltage, for this, for that, I can go on and on.
Well,
so there's a big myth.
Isn't that how
It's
Sound
not
City
because you're
started?
gonna buy-
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, isn't that how Sound City started doing their own amps too? They started by modifying them and eventually said we're going to.
Yeah, well, yes and no. Yeah, they also had a license to do high watts, as you know, in the US. So there's sort of a license thing. But the reality is that, again, it sort of speaks to the same thing I was saying earlier on. Use your ears, and those people were using their ears. And you look at the frequency of it. The good example was the MM1000 console. You look at if you did just the classic curve, you see a big bump in the bass, big bump in the mid-range. You're looking at this, this is a piece of shit. And then you record to it, and it's incredible. In my opinion, the best tape machine ever made. It's absolutely fantastic. And yes, it does bump, at certain frequencies, but you know what? You're the one recording. You think there's too much bass, you can pull it back. Right. It doesn't matter. But the tape machine, as is, sounds incredible.
Right.
And the transport is retarded, but that's a different story. We used to have a graph to be able to, pull the tape. I couldn't thread it otherwise. But it's in same with the 3M tape machines. But at the same time, both of these sounded really, really good. So what are we fighting over? Because we think that at I don't know, you name it, at X Studio they use the Neve, therefore at Montserrat they use the Neve, therefore it's the end of it all. No, absolutely not. I think the ability to make things what you want them to be is a big part of I think success individually, I should say, in that business.
So it's the human element. It always comes back to us as musicians or engineers or producers or anything. It's, you can have the coolest gear, but if you don't know how to use it and you don't know how to listen to it and make it your own. Yeah,
and I think in a way there are no standards. The beauty is that if you look at studios again, for me that's like really the part that I love in the studios, that it's where creativity meets technology, right? It's that moment. And so it's a very unique environment. You're in a bubble. There's nothing human about it. If you think about it, it's a weird place, right? You're in a little glass jar with other people and hoping to get something out of it. But if you look at studios, right, and look at Wessex in the UK that did a lot of the Queen recordings, right, or King Crimson, the first album in the court of Crimson King. Then you go to small studio, old church with small studio, really cramped, right? Everybody's on top of each other. You look at Motown, same story. Everybody's in a minuscule room, and yet it sounds big, right? And all the reverb came from plates. Then you go to Olympic Studio, huge, right? It's an old movie theater. It's massive. I played there. It's gigantic, right? And you look at that, and yet you can get recordings that go from, or Trident Studio is another one. Trident is a big place, was a big place, made all the Elton John, Supertramp, Bowie recordings, Lou Reed, you name it, right? It's like, incredible. Totally dead. Abbey Road, huge orchestral room, yet you can get things that go from I'm So Tired by the Beatles, which sounds like it's right there, right? All the way to A Day in the Life with this huge orchestra, totally open kind of track. So, the space, and this idea that you have a certain rule to record, to me, it flies out the window. It's all bullshit. I think again, I'm repeating myself, but, you just need to find your comfort zone with your tools, and then you can do anything. Before I left Sound City, I did 3 recordings, pop one, a jazz one, I can't remember. And they couldn't sound more different. The room is the same, and so in a way what you're asking from the room is just to make sure it doesn't change what you're hearing. You want it to be something that doesn't kill the sound, doesn't make it reflect too much, whatever it is. you still have control. You can put gobos, you can, all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, you don't want to be in a situation. For me, the definition of great gear and I guess that would be great closing statement. The definition of great gear is that it's got to disappear. I don't want to think about it. It should not get in the way.
Yeah.
And that was always a rule for me. And so naturally where I ended up going is to really dumb gear, right? The Helios console, for all of its fame and amazing sonic clarity, the bottom line is that it got out of the way. And the reason being is that the signal path, the circuit, is stupid. I mean, there's nothing in there. You open it, you just think, why am I paying so much money for this? There is very little. And then you pick a, what's a good example? Not API, but what's the other big British console? Everybody's got them. SSL. You look at an SSL. I mean, you've got like 30 chips per channel. Of course, it's going to sound like I don't like SSL. I think they sound awful. And so you just want something that, disappears. You shouldn't think about your guitar. You shouldn't think about the mic. You should just be able to say, okay, I'm hearing them perfectly, and they sound exactly what I'm expecting. Right. And now that I've got this great sonic bass, what am I going to do with it? Do I want to add reverb? Do I want to compress a little bit? Do I need to EQ a little bit? Whatever it is. But at the end of the day, it should be the basis that, does not interfere. You shouldn't be fighting, upstream, at least that phase. You've got plenty of opportunities to go fight later, whether it's in mixing, whether it's in, processing, whatever it is, editing, etc. So gear that gets out of the way.
That's a spectacular mantra to have for every studio. It really is. That is a great.
It never happened. People are going to look at this guy's an idiot. It does not happen.
No, I'm telling you, that's gonna be my new focus right now. That's gonna be it, because I was looking for something to hang my hat on for my next project. That's gonna be it. I want the gear to disappear. It even rhymes. You can't beat that. It must be true.
Where it fails, the most difficult part, I got to say, for me, was really the speaker selection. I don't want to dwell. I mean, I know we all have to go, but that's the one area that people underinvest in. And that's the one that makes people buy endless amount of gear. You want to do something? Buy a great mic, one preamp, and really spend a lot of money on your monitors. And you're set. You're set. And then again, you still have to. I mean, I see you've got all your sound diffusers there.
I feel bad because I got an SSL, so now I feel like I better hide the SSL. We'll just kind of do this here.
But it depends how you use it. If you use it to record or just as return. As a return console, I think it's great. But anyhow, it's got so many functionality. You can't beat an SSL because everything is in line. And so for the functionality, you got your compressor, your gate, your limiter, everything in one place. At least simple.
Yeah.
Right.
Or very efficient. But the point being is that the monitors are where people really underinvest, and that always shocked me. And that's really difficult when you go in a studio. I mean, there's a thing called Trinoff system. I don't know if you heard about it, which calculates. You put one mic, calculates the entire room for you. So wherever you go, if you carry that with you in a road case, you sort of have, that you don't have to find your way around the room, meaning you don't have to place 5 CDs or your sort of selection of reference recordings and try to guess. It sort of normalizes every single room that you work in. It's a weird jarring experience because sometimes you'll suddenly hear no bass. Right? I mean, there's too much bass in this room, so it compensates. But it's amazing. And so, but the point being is that at least you've got control over your environment. You're in your own studio. If you start being somebody who works at multiple studios, that's a real challenge. And people, for a long time, it was all the horn-based speakers, like the Uray types, really hard. People have sometimes ATCs. Sometimes you're going to get into somebody who just thinks that NS10 is the greatest thing ever invented. And then you got the guy with your Overtone, and then you're going to get the guy with your, barefoot speakers, etc. So it's very easy to lose perspective as to what you're doing. And but again, if you have a studio, first thing you should do is really spend of money on your monitoring system.
Yeah.
That will sort out 80% of your problems in the studio. At least you know what's coming out from the other side of the mic.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he mentioned tannoy. I've got tannoy, so I feel okay about that. My Adams A77 should be all right.
Adams are great.
With the golden ear sub that goes down to 12. Got to have the
Right.
sub. I can't operate without a sub.
I never had a sub because I always had these soffit mounted gigantic ATCs, and so I never felt the need for it. But again, it's all personal, and and there's no right or wrong answer, to be very honest. And it's but you do know that when you look in back in what people were using, like the Steely Dan records. I mean, those were made on the 813C. I mean, I don't know if you worked on those. I mean, your ears bleed after like 3 hours.
What, are those the Uris?
And they're the one with the blue cone.
I had a set of those actually. Yeah, I worked for about 3 years on those. Those made my head hurt. They're brutal.
And so, you listen to Gaucho, Asia. That's what they were mixed on.
But I did find if you can make them sound good on that, man, they translated everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was what you were fighting against. And so, I mean, you listen to like Breakfast in America by Supertramp. Great recording again. And those were also Urais 813 crystal.
They were one of the first time aligned monitors. That was one of the big things is they were time aligned, and we put on the special.
You could adjust them in the back.
Yeah, we had the time aligned cable and everything, and the first time we played them with everything aligned, we're like, oh my God, we've been using too much treble. But that was the time of oral exciters too, so
Yep.
That was a rough time for eardrums, is what that was.
Anyhow, all right. Well, look, not sure if there's anything else you want to discuss, but
you've just been a pleasure and so full of information. Trey, is there anything else you'd like to ask him before we let him go?
I mean, the only there's a lot.
I got a list.
But in the interest of time, the only kind of personal selfish question I had was you mentioned you had one of the guitars you kept was a 72 Tele, I think you said. Have you done any, in the spirit of modding and things, have you done anything to that, or is it pretty much all?
That one has nothing. I'll go grab it.
Wait, he lent it to a friend.
Yeah. So, hold on.
Oh.
Let me see if I can keep
there
it
we go.
here.
Oh, I like the color.
I hate this background. Let me remove the background because it's killing the thing. 1 second.
Is it white that yellowed, or was it kind of a yellow?
Yeah, it's sort of a yellowish. Let me do this. Here we go. Here.
Oh, wow.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, look how dark the neck is, too.
That's awesome.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I love the dark necks. Oh, that's been played, too.
Neck,
it's been seriously played.
That I've kept. And you can tell it's a little bit up. But, it's had a long history, obviously.
That's awesome.
Before I was even born. So.
I'm a huge Tele nut. I just love those silly things.
Yeah, no, it's look, again, that's another tool. I mean, if you want something more aggressive, the one guitar which I always found very challenging was the Stratocaster.
Yeah, me too.
I always found it very thin, and that's where great players come in. I mean, you get a session guy come in with a Strat and say, well, what the hell is he doing this? I mean, I can't get a sound out of it. So.
Well, there are some that would say that the Tele is the harder of the two, so there you go.
Oh.
Yeah.
I love the Tele kind of reintroduced me to dynamic response in playing, and the Strat I've just never. It's interesting you said I've never been able to marry with a Strat because
it's a soft sound. It's a softer thing. It doesn't attack as immediate. It's like it's
I feel like every time I play anything, my pick attack or whatever just makes everything super bright. Whether I'm playing with my fingers or the pick, something about my right hand is just stupid and bright. And the Strat typically that just kind of brings out all the worst qualities of a Strat. So Teles are awesome, and I definitely prefer them.
See, we're just gonna keep this poor guy around all night if we just keep going. We got to let him go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. If somewhere down the road, would you consider coming back? We've got lots to talk about with you.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not really in that business. I'm not at all, man. So But yeah, if you whatever you want to do, all good.
Yeah, it was fascinating. We really had a great time, and I hope you do too. And we'll definitely welcome you back anytime you're willing. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for stopping by at Gear and Gigs for Trey Hawkins and Olivier Chastan. I'm Jet Stone. Take care, everybody. So thanks for joining us on another episode of Gear and Gigs. So glad you guys could make it. Please check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course YouTube. And if you could just take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel, we sure would appreciate it.